Welcome! Time has no meaning here. Your pain will be endless.
What's up, Exiles, and welcome to my Purposeful Harbinger build for Harvest League. Now, Purposeful Harbinger is something that people use to make entire builds based around it only. But after 3.11, it have been dialed back to be just like any other notable that you would introduce to an already existing functional build. So basically, I had this idea of building an aura bot that actually supports itself. I did it by making a normal build and then started introducing aura nodes to it. The best way to do that is by playing as a caster, because all aura nodes exist at the top side of the passive tree. So at the start of my build, I decided to play as an Inquisitor, for two reasons. The first one is the free Consecrated Ground effect given to us by Sanctuary node. Consecrated Ground is straight up 6% life regen every second, that doesn't require any investment to scale like with Guardian Ascendancy. This node also makes it so that enemies standing on our Consecrated Ground take additional 10% more damage. From here we go to Pious Path. This one makes it so that the effects of Consecrated Grounds stick with us even after we have started moving up to 4 seconds unless we get stationary again, effectively maintaining the life regeneration effect, which is converted into energy shield, and that's required to sustain Righteous Fire. The node also gives us a decent amount of cast speed and energy shield regen. This Ascendancy also provides lots of damage with its crit nodes. First we have Righteous Providence, which gives us increased critical strike chance if our enemies are not affected by any elemental ailments, and critical strike multiplier if they are affected by them. Finally, we have the most broken Ascendancy node in the entire Path of Exile Ascendancies, Inevitable Judgment. If you deal a critical strike, you basically double your damage against bosses, mainly because now you are ignoring their 50% to all elemental resistances. And with the Ascendancy out of the way, here I decided to start introducing aura scaling in the build, which will be shown in the passive tree section, which by the way, does look something like this. So passive tree aside, now let's talk about your items, starting with our body armor, Chevron's Wrapping. It's required to prevent chaos damage from bypassing energy shield, and that's required because we are always on low life, for two reasons. The first one is that we want to reserve our life to run additional auras. The second reason is that we can have Pain Atonement, which is basically like another support gem for our main 6-link. Now what is the best way to reserve our life as auras? Well, that is done with Prism Weave Shield. Aside from giving socketed gems free blood magic, which makes them use life in a state of mana, it also reduces their mana reservation, which is important because that's the breaking point for us to use an additional 50% aura. Prism Weave also provides us with some nice dexterity and elemental resistances, arguably one of the best utility shields in the entire game. Anyway, moving on to our helm, we have Crown of the Inward Eye. It boosts all of our stats and makes it so that modifiers to life, energy shield and mana increases our damage at 30% of their values. Please note that modifiers to life specifically only affects attack damage, and that's another reason to go with energy shield in this build. Next, for your boots, we have Centric, a very general purpose boot with good amount of energy shield and evasion. Try to get the 2% life regen lab enchant on it, which will help you sustain Righteous Fire even more. Finally, our last unique item in the build, we have Mark of the Shaper Ring. This one is pretty straightforward. Have an Elder Influenced ring in your other ring slot and you will get lots of added spell damage. Now I wanted my other ring to be a Shaper item, so I could get Assassin's Mark curse on hit. So I had the idea of combining both influences, being Shaper and Elder, using an Awakener's Orb to get both the bonus spell damage from Mark of the Shaper and the Assassin's Mark curse on hit as well. The Elder mod that I looked to combine with Assassin's Mark is a global critical strike multiplier. Anyway, moving on to our amulet, we have a generic one with as many Fizz as extra elemental damage modifiers as possible and some attributes to go along the way. Make sure to craft +1 minimum frenzy charges anywhere possible, since we have no means of generating them in this build. Now for our belt, we have a crystal belt with increased energy shield recovery rate. That's a Shaper and Crusader modifier, and it will greatly help you with sustaining Righteous Fire. Aside from that, you need as many other defensive energy shield modifiers as possible. Now for your most important item, which is your weapon, a cast speed wand with Fizz as extra cold or lightning damage will do the trick. You should also try to get more spell damage on it and critical strike modifiers if possible. If you can't get Fizz as extra lightning on both your wand and amulet, then you might want to drop Wrath and use haste instead. Last but not least, we have gloves. We are looking for as much energy shield as possible on our rare gloves. Also, we are only using 2 purities in this build, so whatever purity you are not using, you will most likely need to have resistance to that purity element type on your gloves to compensate for whatever is missing. You can also have high intelligence roll if possible. And with that, we are done with all of our items. So let's talk about our gem links in them. For our main 6th link, I decided to go with Glacial Cascade because Hatred scales cold damage better than how other elemental auras scales their respective element damage. Although with that being said, you can use any spell you want, but preferably it should be physical based spell. That includes Divine Ire, Vortex, etc. Anyway, alongside Glacial Cascade, we have Inspiration, Spell Echo, Hypothermia, Intensify, and the increased critical strike support gem. Please note that Hypothermia and Intensify does not reflect any change on your tooltip, however they still provide their full bonuses regardless. Now let's talk some auras, starting with the big ones. We have a 3-link setup that goes in our shield. Here we have Hatred, Zealotry, and Haste. Generally speaking, we always use Hatred unless you have decided to use a non-physical based spell like Arc Lightning. In that case, we use Wrath instead. Now I'm using Wrath in this build regardless, because I am in a special case that I will explain in a later segment of this video. Anyway, let's move on to another 4-link setup. Here we have Herald of Ice. It's linked with level 21 Blood Magic and level 4 Enlighten. If the level of any of these 2 gems are lower than what I have just mentioned, this setup will not work, so make sure it's level 21 Blood Magic and level 4 Enlighten. Finally, we have Righteous Fire here. It's always active, which is basically 40% more spell damage. But alas, here we have another 4-link setup. This one has more auras for the build, starting with Discipline, Purity of Fire, Purity of Ice, and level 3 Enlighten. Now Purity of Fire is required to sustain Righteous Fire. The other purity can be changed to Purity of Lightning if your gloves had higher cold resistance. Just make sure that both purities are level 21, because once we socket them in our helmet that is corrupted with +2 to level up socketed aura gems, they will become level 23. And that makes them grants 1 additional maximum resistance to their respective element. This also makes them grants 1 additional maximum resistance to their respective element for each 20% increase the effective aura modifiers rather than 25%. Anyway, moving on to another 4-link setup. This one is our movement skill setup. Here we have Flame Dash, faster casting, level 7 Arcane Surge, which will allow us to gain the Arcane Surge buff with a single Flame Dash cast, and finally some Lightning Golem. We have few gems in our weapon. We have Herald of Purity, Clarity, and Precision. You might want to go as high as possible on Clarity until you feel like you got enough mana regeneration to keep casting your main skill without running out of juice. Whatever mana left goes for leveling up Precision until you have no less than 100 mana remaining. And yeah, that was everything for our gem setups. Now let's talk about jewels. For normal ones, you want increased critical strike chance with cold skills or increased critical strike multipliers with cold skills with increased maximum energy shield prefixes. And for suffixes, we prioritize complementing our missing resistances and then increased cast speed or more critical strike modifiers if possible. From here we move to cluster jewels. We are using ones with added passives grants increased effective non-cursed auras from your skills, because these are the ones that can roll Purposeful Harbinger. We have 2 of these, each adding 4 passives. Aside from Purposeful Harbinger, we have Replenishing Presence as a defensive option, and Vengeful Commander as an offensive one. If you are not using Wrath, then you can ignore Vengeful Commander. Now for Watcher's Eye, originally I wanted to buy one with increased base crit chance while affected by Hatred, and increased energy shield recovery rate while affected by Discipline to help me sustain Righteous Fire. But I found that one jewel that had these 2 mods in addition to increased critical strike chance while affected by Wrath. Now people don't usually run Wrath and Hatred at the same time unless this is an aura focused build, and that was perfect for me because with this jewel, Wrath will give me more damage than Haste, and it is for that reason why I have decided to drop it. However, it's highly unlikely that you can get something similar to this, and that's exactly why I told you to ignore Wrath and just run Haste. Don't forget to anoint your amulet, by the way. With it you want to allocate Charisma, because it is the most powerful aura node on the passive tree that we are not taking. For bandits, make sure to help Allura for the added crit multiplier and all elemental resistances. Next for Pantheons, we take the Soul of the Brine King to prevent enemies from stun locking us. And for the miners, we have the Soul of Shakari for the immunity to poison. Unless you have a very high chaos resistance, then go for the Soul of Tokuhama. And with that, we are basically done with this build guide. If you liked what you saw, then make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any future build guides like this one. Also, don't hesitate to drop a comment telling me what you think. If you have any question, any suggestion, I always try to respond to all comments as quickly as I can. My name is Phoenix and I will see you all in the next video.